back with ChiCast, and today Isha and I are going to be talking about education in AI. So, this is going to be based off of our personal experiences. We're not endorsing any particular companies or universities or whatever. This is just what both of us have experienced while learning about AI on our own. So, to start off with, you might ask, why should we be learning AI? And whether you want to do research in AI or if you're industry and you're trying to use AI as a tool to solve a problem. So, as we had mentioned, I think in the first episode, every major industry has been or is currently looking to use AI to somehow, in some way, improve their products or technologies.
Yeah, like you said, trying to improve the products and stuff. For business development, AI can provide insight on breaking into and succeeding in a market. It would inform who the target market is. It can also help in most effectively selling to that given target market. And in general, it just provides a competitive advantage for businesses. And yeah.
Yeah, so like the other side of that, I think personalized ads is probably one that a lot of people can relate to. So the business side of it is using AI or ML to kind of get those personalized ads out to their audiences. But the flip side of it is when you're learning about AI and ML, you can have a better understanding of how that's actually working. So being on the receiving end of personalized ads, you'll have a better understanding of like how your data is being used to generate those type of personalized ads, and having a better understanding in general of data privacy and what you're allowing certain companies to use from your end.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think there's also something to be said about like if you understand where your data is going, then you have a better control over data privacy, and that's why it's good to get educated in the field of AI, whether it's just knowing what it is or uh, maybe you want to get some sort of certification or something. It really does help with that, I guess. So yeah, and the other thing too is outside of just industry and usual importance of AI and industry and research, AI is cool, and both of us are very and are very unbiased opinions. So it's a hot field, it's emerging, and that's the direction that both education is going in, and just I don't know, the world in general is going in that direction. I personally have seen through, I guess, even just during my time in undergrad, I saw classes, more classes in machine learning come about, and more
Yeah.
classes in those fields come about. I remember at the start of our freshman year, at least, there was just one machine learning class, but by the end of my time in undergrad, there were probably three or four, and you could enter in from different areas. You didn't have to just major in computer science to take a machine learning class. So, Rupal, do you think like AI and ML, is that always going to be the solution to everything?
Yeah, that's one, like, I guess good thing to keep in mind is AI and ML is not just like, I forget what the like saying is, like there's hammers and nails and you can't just like throw one at the other. I don't know if I
That's
made that up or if that's an actual saying.
yeah, no, I get what you mean though.
But you can't, usually you can't just like throw like machine learning at a problem you have. So
Yeah.
getting an education in AI can help you kind of understand what what problems, I guess, machine learning is like a good solution to. Like
Hmm.
often I think there's maybe more straightforward or simpler solutions that could solve your problem, but with like I guess all the AI bubble and the hype around AI, there might be like a tendency to just use machine learning models even though it's like unnecessary.
Hmm.
So getting educated with machine learning, I think, can also help get a better understanding for people of what it's actually capable of and what it's a good use for. And I guess in a similar vein, also getting a better understanding of why robots are not taking over the world, because AI is not really at that level. And once you start learning about it, I think it's like easier to kind of understand. why that's the case.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. I get that question a lot, and I know we talked about it in Karthik's episode too, that
Yeah.
oh, like are robots going to steal everyone's jobs? Is that what this is about? But like you said, I think as we learn more about it, it's not as black and white as it sounds.
Yeah, and like another thing that's come up recently for me at university is like public acceptance of AI or robots.
Hmm.
So like how does society as a whole kind of like accept an emergence of robots just like in everyday life? So if there's like a busy sidewalk, maybe in like New York, and we have these ground robots delivering food, maybe. Like how do people kind of accept that? Like are they letting the robot do its own thing? Are they like purposely trying to step in front of it to kind of toy with
Hmm.
it? So I think just a general like education about AI, it doesn't even have to be technical, but like understanding that, I think that might
Hmm.
help with an increased like public acceptance or maybe increased trust in AI
Yeah.
systems, especially with like autonomous cars and things like that. There might be less of a skepticism towards those type of technologies.
So Rupal, I know you have, at least I know you have more a better understanding of human robot interaction than I do. I'm just aware of what it is. I guess how important do you think it is to learn about that when you're developing these systems, and what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I think in general, it probably definitely depends on the context. So there's different, I guess, there's a range of situations in which the amount of human interaction is like increased or it could be completely isolated. So if you're doing a totally completely autonomous system that's like completely isolated from humans and the environment in general, it's in a very controlled environment, you probably have to think about the human interaction part less. Now, I think on the other end of that spectrum is something like maybe senior care, so in nursing homes, situations like that, you have to be very, very like conscious about the human interaction part because there's a lot of stuff going on. Elderly care is like already not an easy task. There's a lot of different factors that you have to be aware of, and people need different types of needs. Not, not all senior people are like each other. So it's already like tough for humans to kind of be in that environment or take care of all of those different types of situations. When you're developing robots for like senior care, that's like even more important because the amount of safety and trust that has to go into those systems is huge.
Hmm. Yeah. So basically, like, I mean, this sounds kind of obvious when you say it out loud, but the more robots are interacting with humans, the more human robot interaction is to learn about and to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess now we can probably dive into different ways and different avenues of learning AI, because nowadays, especially with the hype and just with how much everyone's talking about it, it's very easy to get lost in all of the resources and in the noise. To be honest, so naturally the question of where do I start comes up. So I mean, it really depends on what you're doing. If you are a student, if you're a student and you want to go into this field, then taking the sort of traditional path and taking graduate level classes or even undergraduate level classes in this field makes sense, because at that point you're paying tuition and it makes sense. But if you're further along in your career and you're trying to make a switch or something of the sort, then maybe going for a formal education is not necessary. For example, there are a lot of graduate programs, especially nowadays. A lot of them are online. There are some online graduate programs that you can you can take robotics classes, you can take artificial intelligence classes. I know there's a master's in artificial intelligence, at one university in particular. There's like a master's in computer science, and you can focus in robotics. That's also online. Grad degrees are expensive and they require a huge time investment, but the good part is if it's online, it is more cost effective and more flexible. And there are also a lot of great in-person programs as well. It really depends on your financial situation and what you're interested in doing afterwards.
Yeah, just to jump in real quick, I think we're also going to talk about like some free resources and stuff. So there is a wide range of, I guess, costs that you can keep in mind. And if you're not like in a position to put in finances into your AI education, there's like free ways to do that too. And in personal opinion, I think the free resources are pretty extraordinary considering that they're free.
Yeah, especially because a lot of times we like don't have the time to take certain classes. Like maybe, I mean, I think that's like a common thing in university when you take as you try to fit in as many classes as you can, but then you can't get every class in. So, I mean, you can supplement that by taking some classes online for free or
Yeah, it definitely depends, I guess, on what your end goal is. Like if you're trying to make a career out of it or if you're just trying to understand some basics. Yeah, so maybe you can start with some of the free resources. So again, we're not endorsing anything. These are just like resources we've used. So like EDX and Coursera are websites that I've used, and I think Isha you have as well. Had some experience with them. They're basically they're online courses that are from like I think in general like accredited universities. So there's probably courses from major universities that you've heard about, not just in America but internationally. And the free version of them is like you can watch the videos and like do the assignments and stuff. And then if you pay some amount of money, you can get like a certificate that you completed the course. And I think there's also like they'll enforce deadlines and stuff. It's like a little more structured once you do the paid option.
yeah. I know some universities also like they post their content on Coursera and on EDX, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
but they also sometimes post it on their own websites and just make it open, like MIT OpenCourseWare
Mm-hmm.
or UC Berkeley. It sounds like also has their own lectures that they post online. U of M does too.
Yeah. For deep learning, machine learning, reinforcement learning, there's some good series on YouTube from like Stanford, UC Berkeley. Those are the two that I've personally watched from pretty prominent labs and professors, and they're great. They had like the entire playlist. It like goes through basically a class. It's basically quite literally it's the class recording of the professor's teaching.
Hmm.
So those are really good as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's also something to be said about the math classes too, because
Mm-hmm.
math is literally foundational to AI classes. And so I actually did something similar where I actually did not ever formally take linear algebra in college, but I went through the MIT OpenCourseWare linear algebra class before I took DSP, which covered linear algebra portions of it at least, but having gone through that actually helped quite a bit as well.
Yeah. So while we're on the topic of math, so again, it depends on your end goal. I think if you're trying to just get a general understanding about AI, so you can like maybe talk about it in conversations or at your company in terms of like a tool you're using, but not something you're directly developing, maybe you don't have to worry about the math as much. But if you're like really getting into it, I think it's really important. And maybe an often overlooked part of AI is the math aspect. So linear algebra, as Isha mentioned, pretty important, and I think the other two is probably probability statistics and then calculus. Probability, yeah, probability statistics is if I had to rank them, I would say that's probably the most. You'll see like a lot of like expectations and distributions when it comes to machine learning.
Yeah, because there's not certainty, right? Like especially if you're working with robots, like you don't when you're doing like state estimation, like you don't know for sure where you are. Everything is just a guess
Mm-hmm.
for the robot.
Yep. Yeah, so that one's huge. I think linear algebra comes up more in like I guess more fundamental robotics type of problems, right? When you're doing like transformations from coordinate systems and things like that.
Yeah, and kinematics and dynamics too. That's that's also important
Exactly,
for
yeah.
that. Yeah, and then calculus is super important. I took a deep learning class in the fall, a graduate level deep learning class in the fall, and I mean, we use derivatives and everything for all the deep learning stuff. So derivatives are there, and calculus is super important as well, um, for back propagation and all that fun stuff. So beyond the math classes, once you've taken the math classes, like what are some other what are classes you would take after that? What are classes you have taken at least?
Yeah, so again, getting into just personal experiences, not endorsements, but Isha and I both went to the University of Michigan. And so, like Isha had mentioned, when we were there, there was kind of like a machine learning class. So I started taking X445, which was like the machine learning class, I guess, at least on the undergrad level. I think there's like more grad classes. So that was like half math, half coding, I would say. So we had like homework sets that were also like problem sets, and then we also had like programming projects. I really enjoyed that class. It was a great experience. I loved the professor as well. And then I think when we were juniors or seniors, like later on, there was more opportunities to take other types of machine learning
Mm-hmm.
classes, especially special topics. Those are one of my favorite types of classes to take in general because they're like very specific on a topic and they're super fun. So if you're like actually interested in that topic, they're one of the best types
Mm-hmm.
of classes to take, I think. So I taken like conversational AI. I took affective machine learning, which was very interesting. It had to do with like emotional, like, so you could, what are some ways that we can kind of get an emotional understanding from text contests. So the NLP side of that also did like some speech and audio type of work, so that was pretty new and interesting to me. I think another like semi fundamental class is computer vision. So at U of M it was like X442, and then again there's like more grad classes, and now probably even more undergrad classes. That one's pretty great too. It like goes from, it covers more than just ML. So there's like deep learning methods that you can do in computer vision, but there's also like just very straight up structured like mathematical things you
Mm-hmm.
can do to images.
Yeah, not just CNNs.
Yeah, that's a fun one because you can like see, like there's like immediate feedback. You can see what's happening to like the images that you're doing transformations on.
Yeah,
So I thought that was cool.
yeah.
That's something I really enjoyed.
I never formally took a computer vision class, but I had done an internship before my senior year that was all image processing work. So I mean, there was like some computer vision stuff in there too. But no, I get exactly what you mean, where it's like you can see the results right away. um, so yeah, I like that side of AI a little bit more because it's you can work with images, it's right there. um, as far as like my education in AI, at this point, I have only formally taken one class within the realm of AI, and it's honestly it's like more specific than I had intended on taking. I think maybe I could, if I had taken machine learning, it would have been a little bit more broad. But I took a deep learning class this past fall at Stanford. It also did cover exactly what Rupal was talking about with using deep learning for computer vision with convolutional methods. They did go into NLP stuff too, talked about RNNs, and just taught us some more linear algebra stuff in general, and talked about linear regression at the beginning and why you should do nonlinear regression and how that's more more informative, I guess. But that's like my AI education, and I ended up taking that class because I worked on a project in one of my grad embedded systems classes where I applied deep learning methods to solve an embedded systems problem, and so I wanted to learn a little bit more about that area. So that's why I chose to take that class in particular. So that's my education in AI. As a computer engineer at U of M, we did, like I said, we didn't have really, there was only one machine learning class. And as a ECE, electrical computer engineering student, you could really only get in if you had certain classes. And so that was hard to take if you were an electrical engineer, and so they started adding more classes towards the end of my time at Michigan. So I hope it's a little bit easier though for students in that area of electrical engineering and computer science to take machine learning classes. So I think that's something to look forward to. I did take DSP though, which did touch on machine learning a little bit towards the end of the class. So I think there are some follow-on classes to that that are for electrical engineers to take machine learning. So yeah, that's like my education in that area.
Yeah, I probably mentioned this in the first episode. So I'm like working on my PhD right now, and that's like in more human robot interaction, but from the algorithmic side of it. So using reinforcement learning and things like that. And I'm at UIUC right now. So I've taken more AI classes during my degree here, more like very specific ones since not in undergrad anymore. Robotics classes, so learning based methods for robots, safety in AI. That was a super cool one. And again, as we've like kind of just talked about a little earlier, it's super important to keep in mind as well. Human centered robotics and then reinforcement learning specific courses. So those were all, I loved all of those classes.
Yeah, these are all great classes to take when you're in a graduate program, and when you're in a formal education. These are really great classes to take, and even if you're in industry and you find lectures online, you can do it that way too. If you're in industry though, I mean, you don't have to go this route. If you can use the information from online lectures and free lectures and stuff and free materials to self teach. And there are other avenues to become a machine learning engineer or a computer vision engineer. For example, there is the Google Cloud certification to become a professional ML engineer. A lot of people do that. I personally have not done that, but that's one path that people take. Google, in particular, has a lot of resources just because they are the ones who started TensorFlow. So they try to provide as many resources as they can to developers or anyone interested in developing machine learning models. So, I think the great thing about this is while there's the hype continues and it continues to explode, this field, I guess, is emerging so much. The amount of resources to learn is also going up too. And that's helpful. So that all of that being said, how Rupal do you stay up to date with AI news and with, I guess, just AI in general?
Yeah, so as a current PhD student, that probably looks a little different than other people might do it. So, yeah, PhD students read a lot of papers. So, going on archive, searching for like certain keywords for the specific topics that I'm interested in knowing more about, just like every week or so. Also, any academic conferences. There's quite a few of those out there. I'm not gonna list them all because there's so many, but there's like general, like big AI ones, and then there's also more specific ones. So when you figure out like maybe which ones you're interested in, looking at what papers have been accepted to them, looking at like if there's papers that have like won the best paper award or whatever for that conference, looking through those. And then I think some more, I guess, less niche ways to stay up to date on AI. So Twitter, which might seem like a weird one, but honestly, AI, like, I guess, sub universe of Twitter is pretty big. So if you follow either companies, so they're like the AI subdivision of the company you work at or companies you're interested in, they'll post like what they're working on or what's like the newest, latest thing that they've released.
Yeah,
And then also,
I feel like
yeah, good.
academic Twitter has become such a thing since the start of the pandemic. I personally didn't use Twitter at all, and then when COVID hit, I had more time, so I was like, let me see what's on Twitter. So I joined Twitter as well, and it's just exploding.
Yeah, I only really got into it once I became a grad student because, yeah, I realized that a lot of academics, so faculty, research professors at university, will be pretty
Mm-hmm.
active on Twitter. So when they put out a new project or a new paper, they'll have like a summary and like videos and everything like in a Twitter thread, and that can be a pretty like digestible way to kind of understand what they're working
Mm-hmm.
on, which is super cool. You don't have to like just read papers in like technical jargon all day. You can kind of get a layman's summary, so to speak,
Yeah.
of that
And in
work.
addition to the learning part too, I mean, I do follow some professors too, and it's interesting to see what they have to they they're more open about their opinions, and you can see their opinions on things too. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just like you see their name on a paper. It's like you can actually put a some opinions behind it. You can see what their opinions are on
Yeah,
things, and it's not just opinions on the things that they're teaching about. It can be opinions on anything. So there's you have some, I guess, a human behind the paper, if you will.
yeah, that's such a good point.
Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
so
it
true.
makes reading papers a little bit more fun that way, because then you can read
Yeah.
them
And it's
and
like kind of easier to, I don't know, maybe like recognize recurring names and
hmm
stuff because you have, yeah, something behind the name as well.
yeah, I'm really curious to see where academic Twitter goes, and even in industry Twitter is a thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in industry. I mentioned in the first episode I'm working as I'm a software engineer, and industry Twitter is also a thing too. You'll see people announcing their new jobs, or like talking about certain things in the workplace that they like or they don't like. And I just think people in general have become much more open about how they feel about things. And I think Twitter, yeah, I don't know, not to endorse Twitter, but like I don't know,
Yeah,
that's
and
just
it's a
like
pretty popular like social media platform. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, one thing on the dumb ideas list was academic Twitter. I think I don't remember where I saw this, but I had heard about like stock market financing specific Twitter. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like a social media platform basically that was like specific to trading. And after I'd seen that, I was like, oh, there should be something like that for academia, and there can be like, I don't know, like subtopics for each research area, and it would just be more organized and maybe like a more specific platform that can be better suited to handle things like research papers. But I don't know. I think that would be cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be really cool to see. For now, though, I guess this is still a good platform, and you're getting to see things behind the scenes. As someone who's not in academia, I find it really interesting too when people in academia post about, oh, like like why my paper wasn't accepted to this conference, or like why it was accepted, like
Mm-hmm.
because then you can see stuff happening behind the scenes too, which is pretty interesting. So that's all. This is all like if you're in an academic setting. I'm assuming at that point you'd be past K through 12. So, Rupal, for you, I know a you had an interest in computer science before you even got to college. Like, what was that like? Did you know you wanted to be a roboticist or AI engineer? Okay.
Not really. I think growing up, so I'm talking like elementary, middle school, math was always like a big one for me. I didn't really like know exactly what I wanted to major in or whatever when I went to college. And then in middle school, I remember like my dad typing into like the terminal at work. So now I know better. He works in like IT and doing like more back end data analytics, things like that. But I thought it was very cool to be typing green or white letters into a black box. I don't know what about it, but I just
Oh
thought
my
it was
god.
super awesome. And that's why I decided I needed to learn how to code. So I used one of these online resources that we've talked about. I started learning Python just kind of on my own. And then in high school, I took AP Computer Science. So that's like some Java and things like that. So that was like, I guess, the beginning of my computer science path. Robotics, I think, was more of like once I got into college and even like later undergrad, not even early undergrad. Yeah, just like being exposed to those type of things while I was physically at a university, or even like seeing things come up in the news more often. So I think some of the online resources we talked about for staying up to date were very academic or niche specific. Some more general ones are just
Hmm.
like news articles or blog posts. Like
Yeah.
I think it was MIT Technology Review. They have like yeah,
Yeah. I think they have like a conference coming
mm,
up or something.
yeah.
I
Just news
I don't know if I'm
sources
joining,
like
but
that. They they're pretty like easy to read and easy to digest information.
hmm hmm yeah. As for me, so my path was a little winding. I guess again to start, I'm not working in the field of AI right now. I just had some exposure to it late undergrad, early career. But as far as my computer science education, which is where Rupal and I overlap in terms of interests, I at the end of high school was interested in physics, and that's what I wanted to do for undergrad. I wanted to be a physicist, and then decided when I got to college that I think engineering is kind of where my interests lie, and I wanted to build things
Mm-hmm.
and do things hands on. And I joined a project team my freshman year actually, and like wanted to do the hands on things, so I did that my freshman year. And the computer science part, I took engineering 101, which is a class at U of M, the very first programming class you take, and I loved engineering 101. And actually, I'm like totally like being vulnerable about this, by the way. I took another class after that, which was the 200 level computer science class, and I immediately dropped it after like the third week of classes because it was just like a rough semester. Things were just going on, and I wasn't really in a good place, and so I dropped it my first semester of my sophomore year, and then the following year, I I had a really great mentor in one of my internships, and I did some programming while I was there, embedded software programming, and so my computer science education like really kind of took off when I started doing embedded software stuff, and then I took that sophomore computer science class again my junior year and absolutely loved it, and then ended up teaching it later too. So it's sometimes it just takes a little bit to, if you start off in high school, I think maybe starting earlier, I feel like with computer science helps too.
Oh yeah,
I always
definitely.
wonder why. Yeah, like I wonder why computer science is not taught in schools as much.
I think with time it will become more common.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just feel like in general it's become slowly becoming more common in high schools at least, and even recently from younger students I've heard that they have like middle school specific classes, which is crazy to me. Like
Hmm.
growing up we didn't really have that. We had something called tech or something like that where they like have you work with like Microsoft Office, so do stuff in like Word and PowerPoint. So yeah, having programming classes in middle school is super awesome, and I hope it continues to kind of be popular and expand into like all middle schools, even
Yeah.
elementary school. There's like some cool. Have you heard of Scratch? Things like
Yeah,
that.
I've heard of
Yeah,
Scratch. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I feel that's like something that's pretty digestible to younger students as well. Just like block and very visual based
Mhm.
programming.
Mhm.
So learning those concepts at a younger age can make it easier to kind of get into the field. And I think, like we've talked about this a lot. A lot of industries are using computer science. So if that becomes as common as like math and reading is, it will hopefully be helpful for everyone in general.
Yeah, like you said, it's definitely gonna take time. The middle school thing reminded me of something. So I know people who are younger than me who had taken computer science middle school computer science classes, and I kind of went through their curriculums, and at this point they're still at the stage where computer science to them is teaching HTML and CSS, and that's it,
Mm,
and JavaScript, which is, I mean, that is a part of computer science as well, but I think I guess showing them that that's not all computer science is also important too, because for some people that's really interesting, and for some people that's really not that interesting.
yep.
So I'm curious to see what comes next of it. I do know that in certain schools too, they've been using robots for education. I have a friend who was telling me about that. They were using robots in a class to teach math or something.
That's super
Um,
cool.
yeah, I know. Yeah, so that's like my. I hope one day that could be a thing that they use robots to teach computer science. I think that would be very cool. um,
Yeah.
if you are in high school, like Rupal mentioned, she took AP Computer Science. I personally did not, but students can start by taking AP Computer Science if it's offered. There are also so many different summer programs now, and
Mm-hmm.
spring summer programs that teach fundamentals of computer science and even the fundamentals of AI. Like that's how much AI is becoming normalized. AI education is becoming normalized. It's you can learn it from a very early age, and it's yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
Yep.
If you did want to work on your first project, there are also a lot of resources online too if you didn't want to formally go through a class and you just wanted to jump in and start a project. If you're in high school or just even anybody at any age, uh, you can you can try going through Kaggle or some try to find some sort of data set and use transfer learning if you want, and try to apply an existing model on that problem, tweak it, see what happens, and go from there.
Yeah, I think if you want to dive in and just get like a project going and just, get your hands dirty with it, Kaggle is like a great resource. They even have like some structured like introductory tutorials or lessons or something
Mm-hmm.
like that that kind of
Mm-hmm.
like walk you through. I think like at least I don't know if this has changed, but when I had done it, it was like predicting house market like trends.
Yeah, yeah. I think I had actually gone through the same one at some point. It was like an intro to deep learning or computer vision or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, it's
I
just
don't
I think it's
remember.
like an introductory
Yeah.
ML course, so you like take in some past data of housing like sales and trends, and then you try to predict the future market. And
Yeah.
yeah.
That one, I think that particular course takes like probably like a day to do.
Yeah,
Not even a
it's
day. I don't even think it takes that long,
exactly.
but they like walk you through it with
Mm-hmm.
the notebook, Jupyter notebook type of thing. Yeah, but AI education is cool and it's AI is becoming more democratized in the education system meaning not just K-12 and bachelor's and grad,
Mm-hmm.
also just in industry too. So take advantage of it is I think but what both of us are trying to get at here. um, to wrap up, I guess maybe we can talk about how our identities as South Asians have shaped our engineering education and just our outlook on education and engineering in general. Rupal, do you want to start off?
Yeah, so I talked a bit about like watching my dad type on his laptop is kind of what got me into CS in the beginning, and then also getting into higher education. Part of that has to do with so my mom was not allowed to like pursue STEM,
Mm-hmm.
like in higher education, and so hearing that story like has kind of motivated me. I think more personally to take that route myself, and having her support and of course my dad's support has been a huge help.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, it's yeah, being I think being South Asian, one thing that we talked about especially with the episode with Karthik is that it's pretty common expectation to go into engineering or like medical school and
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
So getting into CS in college, that wasn't like, I don't know, that wasn't something I would get pushback on.
okay.
I think going into like the PhD degree was something that I had to like talk through more, because that's also I think a new concept to everyone in my family. Like I didn't even know what the full process of getting a PhD degree looks like until I was like more of a senior undergrad student, and so I had to like kind of explain that to my family as well and walk through that process. But yeah, I mean, they've been pretty supportive overall, so I'm like pretty thankful and grateful for that. And yeah, that's I guess my how my personal identity is kind of tied into my views on education, engineering specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome that your parents are super supportive and luckily, I can also say the same thing. Both of my parents work in tech. Uh, my mom, she did her, so she has an advanced degree in physics. She did her undergrad in physics and then her master's in physics, and that I think to me was probably one of the reasons I was also interested in doing physics for undergrad. Was I was really inspired by her story and um, just the fact that she like went out there and did that. Um, there is, I will say, in South Asian culture, there is an expectation that, oh, you should get an advanced degree at some point, and go to a good university that's top ranked. You know, I think just
Mm-hmm.
that's like, yeah, I found that to be particularly interesting. Um, I personally, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of trying to just do my own thing and just do what works for me based on my interests and my personal situation. And so, yeah, I think going straight into software engineering helped me get started on my career pretty early and start working towards some of the personal financial goals that I have. So, it's not necessary to get an advanced degree. You If you need
Yeah.
one, and for example, if you want to be a professor, you need a PhD. But if you want to be a software engineer, you don't have to get a master's or a PhD. You can get a bachelor's in computer science or computer engineering, and you don't even need a bachelor's, honestly, for software engineering. I'm
I wanted to
realizing.
mention that. Yes, I have met people throughout like life in general that have gotten into CS related careers without a bachelor's degree.
Yeah,
And I think there's also this rise of like almost like trade schools,
yeah,
like
like
maybe
boot
like
camps.
2 year program boot camps. Yeah, exactly. Things like that that can get you into the industry.
Yeah, yeah. My mom also did like a she didn't get a degree in software engineering. She did like a certification,
Hmm.
and I mean it was the same thing. Like you can do a boot camp. You don't have to be a degree holder to go into software engineering.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, this was incredible, and this was a very interesting conversation given our different places in life right now as far as our education and
Yeah.
our different backgrounds, even though we're both Indian. Like we both have had such different paths, I feel like, which is very cool to talk about. And we hope that the resources that we talked about in here will be helpful to anybody who wants to pursue AI as a part of their education or just learn a little bit more about it. So yeah, with that, thank you, chai lovers, and until next time.